Welcome to the Rainmaker Multiplier on Demand, a podcast for leading financial professionals, or rainmakers, and their teams that offer support for securing a successful future. From marketing help to staffing structure, listen and subscribe for actionable insights from advisors and skilled professionals alike.
It is 11 a.m. It's time to party with our special guests, Wayne and Garth, today. Hello and welcome to this week's coffee break. This is our special Halloween edition. We'll be covering the scary truth, lawsuits, fines, and what not to do. I'm sure we've all seen or heard the stories this year of fines being handed down, especially when it comes to the SEC marketing rule. So today we brought in our resident thought leaders in this area to share some stories and help us navigate this space together. So with that, I will introduce you to our guest baristas, Dustin Anaas and Kerry Darrington, otherwise known as Wayne and Garth, today from our compliance department at PCA. Thank you, Dustin and Kerry.
Party on, Matt.
Party on, Matt. Glad to be here.
Yeah, Dustin, let's start with you. Getting things started, what is one of the stories lately that shocked you the most about the firm getting hit with fines, and what can our audience learn from these situations?
All right. Something came out in September that was very not excellent, right? There was this big announcement that came out from the SEC that 9 RIAs were hit with some marketing rule violations. And the thing that was extra scary about it is that they're all like our size of RIAs, right? So a lot of times we're used to seeing these huge fines dropped to huge companies, right? That are hundreds of billions of dollars under assets, but these are in the $1 to $4 billion assets under management range. And one that really stuck out was a firm that disseminated an ad claiming it could provide investment advice that put the client at first by, quote, aligning incentives and eliminating conflicts of interest without providing any context for this claim, right? Not by saying, hey, I can give conflict-free advice without any conflicts and not providing any context for that. They were hit with a $325,000 fine, Matt.
Wow. Not a good thing. And yeah, something we can all keep an eye on. I know we've shared that, I think, in the compliance corner, a link to that article too, so everyone can check that out for more details.
Yeah. But I think the lesson really to be learned from there is none of us are conflict free with anything we do. In this particular instance, everything that can be substantiated needs to be substantiated in our world. That really is what it boils down to. And there, we got to admit sometimes, hey, this is an impossible situation for anyone to substantiate ever. And then we just got to find a little different way to say it.
So, and Kerry, similarly, how can some of these common missteps be avoided through better practices proactively?
Yeah, absolutely. This common misstep, it really comes down to education. That's crucial. So taking the time to stay up to date with SEC regulations, that's the first step. And there's several ways to do that. We do send out newsletters. We do the quarterly newsletter, monthly quick hits. We have the annual compliance training. I know everyone waits all year long to be able to take it. They're excited about that. Plug in. It's due in 2 weeks to make sure that's done. And then just being aware of the news sources that you go to, watching out for headlines. My husband sent me one this morning on this very thing. So just being aware of that. And then knowing the guidelines and following them, including advertisements, testimonials, endorsements, performance metrics, making sure they align with SEC rules, as well as third-party rankings, making sure that you're including the required disclosures, following the guidelines, and displaying the ratings accurately. A lot of that comes down to the disclosures, full transparency. And then a huge one that's coming up, especially we're heading into this time of year, is gifts and entertainment. So obviously, Garth and I like to party on, right? We totally encourage partying on. And that's
Excellent.
a big part.
Party time.
Party time. It's excellent. But you got to keep in mind with partying on that obtaining pre-approval and documenting any gifts or entertainment is especially important. So if you're going over that set limit, especially, and one thing that we highly recommend is tracking this through the year. So let's say you have a client appreciation event in January. You kick off the year and you have a client that comes to it, but it's only $30 a client. But later in the year, that same client is getting married and you send them a really nice bottle of champagne and some engraved champagne flutes. Now you're over that $100 limit, but you haven't been tracking it. So it's just really a great practice to keep a log going. I know it can be tedious, but it can really save you should it need to. And then I'm on a roll here, Matt. Feel free to...
Keep going.
Okay.
I like it because I think, I agree. I think especially right now, this time of year especially, the gifting is very applicable. And like you're talking about the tracking, hopefully everybody's been tracking throughout the year. If not, I know we've got spreadsheets we can share to help them track, but also what they can do if they're approaching that limit. Doesn't necessarily mean they can't, but that's where working with your team. So yeah, please keep going.
Absolutely. Great way. Yeah. It's not that it's not allowed by any means. It's just tracking that and making sure that you're staying aware of it. Making sure that all performance claims are accurate and based on complete data, avoiding cherry picking accounts and reporting balanced representations of relevant portfolios. That's something that we're seeing. But lastly, and the easiest way is really just communicate with compliance. We are an open door. We try to foster a very supportive environment, and we encourage you to come to us with any questions or concerns or thoughts or feedback.
Great. Thank you. Dustin, I guess switching gears here, off-channel communication, I know is a big topic for the SEC. What are some of the different ways that firms have been hit by stricter guidelines regarding this?
Okay, so off-channel communications, right? You're thinking about like your text messaging or messaging through your social media channels like LinkedIn or Facebook when people are reaching out to stuff like that. The biggest reason that the SEC is saying this is all record keeping, maintaining accurate records of your activity on there. And then compliance does their own things with that with certain kind of reviews, but it all boils down to record keeping and inaccurate record keeping. Now, here's the bugaboo in this whole thing, Matt, is that there is a big law firm called the Morgan Lewis Law Firm that actually sent out a release saying, hey, these guidelines are super unclear, and these fines that are being handed out seem to be random and not necessarily always following the same path, which can be super scary for RIAs, right? Are we doing the right thing? We don't really know. And even SEC commissioners, even well-intentioned firms could find themselves in the commission's enforcement queue time and time again under the current standards and record-keeping rules if they follow it to the book. So what we really need to do is so the compliance department, we're working as hard as we can to find out what these rules and regulations are and keep our ear to the ground for what these fines are. And then on the offices is really just making sure that you're staying archiving, right? If we send you a note that says, hey, your social media, your account is offline, hop right into Smarsh and do that, or whatever your firm's archiving might be. Ensuring that you have the appropriate email addresses archiving. If you want to text message, check in with your compliance department and make sure that you're using the correct platforms to do so and that they are archiving to the right places. These fines are $325,000. That was the last one we talked about. That's a big fine. These are in the tens of millions of dollars for these fines. And these are actually from self-reporting firms too. They've admitted they've done this and they're still getting hit with up to the $50 million fines. So this is a really serious thing. We need to keep all of our communications archiving. We need to keep it in line with all that stuff just to really, keep the SEC hopefully happy.
Yeah, and I saw some of those articles too. I know Dustin, both of you, your team does a great job of circulating those for us. Those fines, like you said, were at that level even with the self-reporting, and the SEC had said they were lower because of the self-reporting. So that tells you what those could have been otherwise.
Yeah, and this is actually interesting too. So not only are they getting hit with these big fines, but as part of their whatever they got hit with from the SEC, they need to hire an outside compliance firm, extra cost to do this. Like those things are very expensive. And what's also interesting is the SEC also made them admit wrongdoing publicly. That's not really a common thing for them to do, but every off-channel communications, they've made it that these companies make an announcement saying, hey, we messed up. That's all public record and things like that too. Just a lot of things to think about with the off-channel communications. Yeah, and I know Kerry's going to have some thoughts on that too, maybe.
Yeah, and real quick before we switch gears here, Charlie had a question in the chat. I know Ryan addressed it, but I don't know if either of you wanted to add anything to that. Does PCA compliance know what the top causes of E&O claims have been the past couple of years? And I know, Ryan, thank you for responding with some of those in the chat, but I didn't know if there was anything else to add to that specifically.
Yeah, okay, so we can break that down a little bit, right? Unsuitable investments and recommendations, right? Like maybe that's some important note taking on the client on take credit for the work that you're doing, right? Make sure that you're listening to your clients and that you're taking action on that stuff, right? Trade errors, unauthorized trading, maybe Ryan can speak a little bit more to that. And failure to disclose conflicts of interest, right? That's working with your compliance department to making sure that you're able to talk about your conflicts of interest in the appropriate way if they're allowed, and if not, then ending those conflicts of interest.
Yeah, Dustin already covered some of the conflicts earlier and some of the issues with disclosing that you don't have any conflicts. Everyone has conflicts. We have a conflict to right policies, the right insurance policies, to roll money over, it gets us paid. So inherently, we always have a conflict of interest. So the fact of saying you have no conflicts just is never going to be true. As far as the trading goes, unauthorized trading shouldn't be something that pops up around here very often. Most of our accounts are discretionary trading, so we don't have people calling and say, why are you trading my account? We have the authority to trade people's account at our discretion. Trade errors, however, do happen quite a bit. Just inputting the wrong ticker symbols, inputting the wrong instructions, not taking clear instructions from the client, whatever the case may be. Trade errors do happen. We get about 15 or so trade errors a quarter. Some are varying amounts, some are very much. Some, I think our highest one's been in the $30,000 range. So trade errors do happen. Just be careful when you're submitting trade instructions that they're clear.
Okay. Yeah, thank you both for addressing. Kerry, bringing it back to the off-channel communication. I know, Dustin, thank you for feedback there. What are some strategies that advisors can be implementing to stay within compliance, specifically regarding to the off-channel communications?
Yeah, and Dustin touched on a lot of these. The main thing, of course, you're wanting to only use the approved compliant channels. So business email addresses for all business communication, approved messaging apps, secure client portals. So you're wanting to really avoid any sort of texting, social media direct messaging, or using personal email. And making clients aware of that too. It's not as common that they're aware that things are being monitored and archived. And so for them, texting doesn't seem like they're doing anything wrong. So making sure that when you're communicating with clients through email, you're saying, hey, email me back or give me a call. It's so second nature for us to say, shoot me a text. And when we see that in email review, we don't know that, oh, that was an accident. They didn't really text me. So just being aware of how you're communicating to your clients and making sure you're not blending the personal emails with your professional business one.
Great. And if you and Mike, do you mind outlining the approved platforms we have for texting through PCA and why those were selected?
Yeah. Dustin, actually, can I have you chime in on this one since you're our guru with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
up.
So we got 3 right now. My Rep Chat, which was actually just purchased by FMG like maybe a year ago. So they're look out for some more like stuff there. But what's nice about My Rep Chat is you can get set up and running with texting compliantly like within 20 minutes. I just send you a link and it's pretty ready to go. It's a little bit more bare bones, but there are some nice like articles there and things like that. And it's really fast and pretty simple to use. So that's why I like that one. Redtail Speak. This one is really great for people that use Redtail as their CRM currently. It's really good at setting up. It's definitely more of a marketing based texting platform. So you can set up your campaigns in there. And what I love about Redtail Speak is every message that you, as long as your CRM's up to date, every text message you send to your client will get logged in that client's file. So all of you're getting like double archiving happening there. And it's super easy for you and your staff to reference. Like, hey, I texted so-and-so about this. You can go and look at what we talked about and update stuff as needed. The third one is Zoom, which we use here at C2P. That's great for people probably who already have Zoom as like their phone setup. It's a great, like just alternative to a cell phone texting platform. It's a little bit pricey unless you're already like using Zoom already, like I said. They're all 3 really great options, and I'm more than happy to talk to anybody about them. One thing I did want to touch on quick is like a lot of people put their cell phones out there for business purposes. Hey, call me on my cell so it's available. And sometimes you'll get text messages from your clients and you can't help that. The best way to approach that is to email that person back and say, hey, I received your text message. Can we keep this on this platform so I'm staying in compliance? Like, you don't need to make it sound like that, but just like, hey, this is how I need to communicate with you is through email about these things. And that can be especially tricky if you have clients who are friends. And where does that line blur? So as soon as that conversation turns to anything business related, just do yourself a favor and flip it right over to email or whatever is archiving for you.
Thank you, Dustin, for covering that. And as you mentioned, we're using Zoom here at C2P. And for anyone curious, we're using My Rep Chat over at JL Smith. So that system, like Dustin said, very easy to set up and utilize there. And for anyone working with the agency, I know Kerry Chadoff has experience as well working with My Rep Chat. So if you are interested in either of those, like Dustin said, reach out to him or our marketing team, and we'll get you set up on the compliance approved texting services. So Dustin, I guess switching gears now, what are some of the ways that advisors have been penalized regarding the SEC marketing rules specifically as of late? And what are some tips to remain compliant based on what you're seeing are those like the most common infractions?
Okay, so I'm going to go back to that first round of fines that I talked to you about at the beginning of the episode, right? Part of that too was some companies who disseminated ads with testimonials that didn't come from current clients and they didn't disclose that. And also didn't more disclosure from third-party endorsements as well. That was several of the fines, right? Ranging from $50,000 up into the six-figure range. So again, disclosure of anything that comes from a third party is so important, right? And if it's any kind of testimonial or third-party rating, you need to work with your compliance department to make sure that you've got the appropriate disclosure language in there. There's a few items that need to be laid out in there. And a big thing too for these was the date when the award was received. So a lot of these fines were given out because, hey, we received this award, but the award didn't say what time it was. And it ended up being over 5 years ago, and which can be misleading to a client. Hey, we were the best place to work in like that doesn't necessarily translate sometimes. Another thing that, again, I just do want to touch on that free of all conflicts thing again, just because it's Brian Thorpe, who we talked about in the past, who's an industry guru when it comes to testimonials and things like that. That he said of the conflict thing, free thing, that like, even though acting in the client's best interests, it still might also be it also might be a conflict, right? Because you're going to be receiving commissions on these things, even if the client does well. So even if you're acting in their absolute best interest, it's still a conflict for you. And that's why we can't say it that way. Another thing that's come up too is claims of being in organizations that are either old, you're not a member of that organization anymore, or the organization was simply made up. Designations, making sure that you are accurately listing your designations and things like that. Just really making sure that you're staying up to date as much as possible and working with the people around you to get you there, whether that's your compliance department, other people in your office, other advisors, things like that.
Thank you. I know some of those things you mentioned just come down to basic business ethics of how to operate with those. You touched on the testimonials too. I know we've covered this before, but I think worth the reminder for those, because I know a lot on this call, just I know from talking with several of you, using the testimonials. If either you or Kerry could share like the best practices again for soliciting and or using those testimonials in your marketing messaging.
Yeah. Okay. So solicitation, that's an interesting one because cherry picking is a big concern of the SEC, right? So if you're going to ask for testimonials, you need to make sure that you're asking the entire group in that situation that you're asking for, right? So if that's an email, that's your entire client base that you got to send out, right? There might be some other situations face to face where if you're in every client meeting, if you're able to like discuss that there. But really what I want to ask people to do is be opportunistic when people send you nice emails, right? If you did a great job and they said, hey, thanks a lot, you really did this for me, send them a quick email back and say, hey, do you mind if we put this on your website? And Matt, me and you talked about this in the last episode. We don't need a library of these things. Maybe 1 or 2 a year that are really impactful are good enough. They really are. Because those are going to be the ones that stand out.
Yeah, there's something about the brand messaging of that. If you get those and reinforce those few versus you're constantly trying to decide between 10 that you've gathered, it makes it more difficult on advisors on both ends. Gathering all of those, 3 of us, it's gathering all those, working with compliance to approve all of these and get them in order, and then finding where's the best place to utilize them. If you've got a couple that you find are very powerful, especially that speak to working with the team or the process, that'd be my recommendation to find those.
And the other thing about asking for them is it's tricky in our industry because you can't say, we've all received these emails, right? Like, hey, did I do a good job? At least or send us your thoughts. We can't say, did I do a good job? You know what I mean? It's got to be, tell us your thoughts on your experience is about as impactful as that line can get coming from a financial advisor, right?
All right.
At least in our PCA world, that's what the determination we've made. So asking for them is really tricky. And Google reviews too. Asking for Google reviews is really tricky. So I know that they're crazy important, especially on Google to drive that. But we work with some offices. Actually, we just did an audit with some office who in their client packet at every annual meeting slides it over with just a QR code to their Google My Business page. It doesn't say anything else on there. Maybe it even says leave us a review, but it doesn't. It's a simple language. And we looked at it, I was like, wow, that's a pretty good idea because every one of their clients is getting it. They're not eliminating anybody from it. And it's in paper form, which is also a nice thing. And it's just basic language. And it's their clients, people that have worked with them for 10, 15, 20 years, right? They're not going to be offended by that.
No, that's a great idea. Thank you for sharing that. Kerry, how should the financial advisors approach the use of third-party endorsements and claims of conflict-free advice? And we've hit on that a few times, obviously very important. That's where a lot of these fines came from, to stay within the SEC's marketing rule.
Yeah, so we have touched on a lot of it. To break down, we're really looking for those disclosures. That's imperative. And so to break down what we really need to see on all of those to cover you, it's rating criteria, explain how the rating was determined, including any specific factors, disclose any possible conflicts of interest, whether the IA or firm were paid for the rating, what the financial relationship is between the organization and the firm, and making sure to clarify that the rating may not reflect all aspects of the advisor's performance or quality. So you don't want to state something that guarantees future performance. The other thing that is very important is that the disclosure not be hidden. It needs to be of equal prominence. So oftentimes you'll see disclosures at the very bottom of a web page, tiny font, very different. It's on there, but is it really on there? So it needs to be prominent. It's not as aesthetically pleasing, but it's necessary. So that's the number one thing that you could do to make sure you're compliant and safe.
Yeah. And just to reiterate too, because I see a lot of this just out, not necessarily with our advisor network, but in general, that works the same for social media posts as well. When you're doing those on social, that disclosure of having that on there, correct?
Absolutely.
Great. I guess this next one kind of encapsulates a lot of this. So I'll ask it to both of you, maybe Dustin, I'll start with you. How can advisors and compliance team members like yourselves communicate these upcoming changes with each other? And are there any quote unquote best ways to work together and stay informed? Because we know this is constantly evolving.
Yeah, absolutely. I get daily email alerts from like wealthmanagement.com, from Financial Advisor Magazine, stuff like that. I also have signed up for sec.gov. They send out alerts and they have a huge list of them, and I've checked the boxes for which ones I want to receive and things like that. But honestly, the thing that is the best is creating a culture of talking about it together. And of course, our compliance team does. That's our job, right? But I'm going to give a shout out to Chelsea on the marketing team, who oftentimes I've read an article and she'll send me a link before I even have a chance to talk to her about it. She'll be like, oh, this office messed up. And it might not even be about marketing stuff. And so it's really just creating that culture of talking about, yeah, people mess up, but also trying to find ways to, and I'll even shout out to Kerry too. We've talked about the testimonials thing a lot to try to nail down where this gray line really establish where we think we can be with that kind of stuff. So the biggest thing is finding a network of people to talk to within your organization, but also outside of your organization. Ryan on our team, he has this forum that he goes on to, which is incredibly important for the way we do business, because we're able to ask several firms how they might be doing things, especially given that PCA is a little non-traditional in C2P.
How about you, Kerry? Anything to add?
Yeah, I like coming together as an office. So we did some audits last month, and I was really impressed to hear that at their weekly meetings that they do in their office, compliance is always brought up. So it's something that is just always on the forefront of their mind. Someone handles it, anything new in compliance, they're the liaison that'll bring it, make sure everyone knows and is aware of it. And then just, I guess, looking at compliance overall as less of a daunting thing and more as just safety. We take that mentality, we don't even realize we're doing it, into everyday activities, right? You wouldn't go start a bonfire on a very dry, windy day. That's just in our mind. So if we can program ourselves to think about whether or not something's compliant, not in a scarcity way, but just in a way of, hey, I'm curious, I'm going to bring this to the compliance team, or I'm going to talk this out just to learn more. And then really having your guidelines in place, bookmark certain things for easy convenience. That way it doesn't seem as big and scary. It's there for you. If you know where to go for it, and we're always here, but if you have your easy method, it just simplifies life, and then you can focus on your practice. And that's really what you're wanting to do.
And I know it's Halloween, but our compliance team is not scary. I'll reach out to them, reiterate the resources we have. Check out the compliance forum that we have, reach out, calls with them. The marketing roundtable, I know many of you join those, and we have members of the compliance team that join those frequently, and we'll continue to make those resources available. Speaking of Chelsea, thank you for putting that in the chat for the sample disclosures in there. But Kerry and Dustin both said the more engagement, the better. So please ask questions or share things that you're seeing that we want to look into and collaborate as a mastermind group here. Dustin, Kerry, any last minute tips or points of emphasis?
I would say we're always open for feedback. Whatever's going to make your life easier, bring it to us, bring us questions. We learn as well. Then we can all party on because it's excellent.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Dustin. Thank you, Kerry, for joining us today and sharing all this. Thank you, Ryan, for
We are not worthy. We are not worthy.
And please tune in next week, Social Security COLA increase, and addressing those with clients, and hope everybody has a happy Halloween.
Thanks for tuning in. This podcast was brought to you by C2P, an organization whose purpose is to educate, train, grow, and support holistic financial advisors so families can achieve true prosperity. Never miss an episode by subscribing now to discover new resources and strategies. Visit C2PEnterprises.com to learn how we can help scale and secure your business. At the time of delivery and any subsequent publishing, information was deemed reliable, but is subject to change by the time of listening or viewing. The contents of this piece include options and projections of C2P, are subject to change, and are for informational purposes only. The information provided in this presentation is not intended to be individual investment, tax, or legal advice.